Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Ms. Teresea Archaga. She is a certified grief counselor and support group practitioner with the American Academy of Grief Counseling. She holds a bachelor's degree in human development and a master's degree in career development. While her certifications and degrees are important for building knowledge and reinforcing her commitment to being a lifelong learner, nothing beats the lessons she's learned and her self awareness that she's gained in her own journey through grief and loss. She has experienced several significant losses that we are going to talk about today in her life and healed from childhood trauma. Life as she knows it is forever changed. Without her loved ones, it was important for her to make meaning out of her loss and pain, and she discovered her purpose, and her purpose has been serving others. We asked that at the end of her graduation program, what would she do with her work? And her answer was and remains to serve whoever needs her. Teresa is going to open up and share with us about her personal loss and what she's learned in her grief journey and how she is serving others today. Let's get into this conversation now.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. We are welcoming Teresa to our community. Hello, Teresa.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You are so welcome. Thanks for being here. I love having an opportunity to bring people to the community that want to serve. And the ability to serve just comes from so many different places. So, what is it that you do and how do you serve people?
So, I am a work in progress, and I think that we all are in our grief. A lot of folks think that, once that milestone hits, that we're done. What I'm finding in my experience after several consecutive losses, the work is never done. And in fact, I find myself going back to other losses that I've experienced and going, oh, okay, I felt this before. What is it? And now I'm able to put a label on it. I didn't have a lot of support in my healing journey, which leads me to where I am and finding my purpose. I really want to use my experience, strength, and hope in order to help encourage, inspire, and hopefully influence others to start expressing their grief more outwardly instead of swallowing it down and trying to ignore it. And so I became a certified grief coach. I've always been a doer by nature. So the talking is good, but I want to also take action. So it's not enough to just say it. I need to take the steps to move forward. In my case, I struggled with that and taking the first steps. And I don't even know what that first step looks like. And so I think it's just take a step, any step. It's always in the right direction.
Wow, that is a lot. Thank you for sharing that. And I want to circle back to several of the different things that you mentioned. You talk about the idea of reaching a milestone and it's done. What does that milestone look like? And what do you think people have a false conception about?
So my employer had the 3 to 5 bereavement days. And so that's just enough for you to make the funeral arrangements, make the phone calls, etc. So the 5 days are over. So I looked at as like my first milestone, getting through the first steps of it. What I discovered was that's not enough because then you have the calm and then you have the storm, and you might have that storm several times over. what do you do when you're in the storm and you're not knowing or anticipating that storm coming? Then you have the first holidays. Those are always a struggle. And it's mostly because you don't know what that holiday or that event looks like without that individual for the first time. Then you have the anniversaries of their deaths. How do you memorialize that? How do you honor them? And if you're struggling with relationships with those individuals, which I did in some cases, do you recognize or honor that memorial or that relationship? So I think that for me, it was really important that a lot of that processing was more for me than it was for the individuals that I lost. They're no longer here, but I needed for me to make sense of it and to honor it in my way that felt comfortable with me.
Thank you. I like that because you're so right. 3 to 5 days. I mean, day one, you're probably disoriented and just in shock and coming to terms with this is really a thing. And if it's happened on a weekend where you're just floating through that. And I don't know about you, but when you return to work, there are still things you're kind of doing on the side regarding this, that there's still unfinished business, if I will say. Also, 3 to 5 days is a drop in the bucket for time. Being able to come back to work and think that you're functioning at the same level in which you were, I think is unrealistic expectations for people. The idea of experiencing those first anniversaries is really important, like you said. You brought up something I didn't really think about, the idea of relationships that were not that well, and how do you honor those or represent those, or how do you, without guilt, free yourself that you no longer are burdened with that difficult part of a relationship? Not that you wish this person's demise, but now that maybe you have to free yourself from some animosity or some negativity that you've been holding on to because that person's not here and you cannot have closure with them. So maybe
Yeah.
you have to have a burn bowl ceremony or something that you have to do to be able to release that negative energy, not hold guilt that you are relieved that you don't have to struggle with that relationship. And I definitely would say the idea that it's over after the first year of all those, it really just starts to begin
Yeah.
because now you're no longer most likely in this heavy grief fog. And you're like, I have to do this again and again and these other different things. And it brings on a different process of grieving that I think most people are not prepared for or even aware of, because there's this society concept after a year, you're fine and you go on living. And
Mhm.
you and I both know that is so far from the truth. I like your statement of helping people move forward with strength and hope. How did you land on those two words as far as the foundation of what you do?
I definitely turned to my spirituality and
Okay.
God. My mom always used to say that God strangles, but he doesn't choke.
Oh, I've
uh,
never heard that. Okay.
and, you know, I had lost between 2020 and 2023. My sister died June 6th, 2020. About 3 weeks later, my sister in law died, and she was in her country of Honduras. My brother in law died on the wedding day. My cousin died in a tragic accident. My grandma died. And then lastly, my dad died. And I didn't really have time to appreciate all that loss as I was in the midst of taking care of the family members who, in my mind, had greater investment in those relationships
Mm,
or in that death than I had, not honoring or recognizing my pain. And in November of last year, I took a mental health leave from my work. And I used that time to really reflect on everything that I had experienced and how far I had come in the healing process, and trying to visualize what that future looks like. So I had to reflect on that through prayer and through meditation and through guidance. My prayer is, God, lead, guide, and direct me into the path that I'm supposed to do, living my higher purpose. Well, in 2021, when my brother-in-law died, he was a fireman in San Francisco. I actually started my grief loss certification process, and I completed the first level, and then I kind of put it on hold because of life. But when my dad died in last year, and when I went on the mental health leave, I said, I need help. I tried to find that help. I couldn't find it anywhere because in my area there aren't many therapists, counselors, or coaches that specialize in grief and loss. So I'm one of the few in my area, which I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I decided to get back into the flow of things and revisit my interest in that, and it has since grown. I've not only healed myself and learned more about myself and my process, I've also been able to help others in theirs.
That is a lot of people, Teresa, in a very short period of time. I can easily see that as one person transitioning, you were just catching your breath from that, then another person leaving this world. And you mentioned the idea that other people were, you felt as if other people were more invested. What relationship did they have with the person that passed that made you feel like their relationship was more invested than yours?
Well, before I knew better. So I have my older sister who passed away June 2020. So she left behind two daughters and several grandchildren. My younger sister didn't have a relationship with my older sister as I had, but my nieces were left behind. And so they lost their mother. I felt, that their relationship to their mother may have taken a priority over my relationship as a sister. My sister, my younger sister, who lost her husband on their wedding day, I had a really solid relationship with my brother in law. I loved him dearly. We actually shared the same birthday, so we were birthday twins. And he was a very big part of my children's lives. That's the uncle that they knew and loved. So I'm caring more for my sister and her loss of her partner. And I'm caring more for my children because, they've already experienced the loss of my sister and now my brother-in-law. So I'm putting my children ahead of myself. Let's see, when my grandmother died, the relationship with that my dad was disabled. And so he wasn't able to support in the estate planning or transitioning, what have you. I was physically capable and I was also his caregiver. So in his place, I served in his place and it was exhausting. And then caring for my father when he finally passed, I'm thinking, okay, I hate to say this, but I felt free because there was really no one left to take care of. But in the midst of that lack of or freedom that I found, I discovered that I wasn't free. I have my stepmother who's 84 years old, and she just lost her life partner. She was married to my father for 25 years. She has no family.
Mm.
I'm it. Well, I can appreciate the little. My mom has a life of her own and is able to live her life and do her things. She's still there, and she needs me and I need her. I had that mentality of being orphaned because my mom passed away when I was 25. My dad passed away when I was 50, and it's really interesting to be 50 years old and say, "Oh, I'm an orphan." But that exists too. It's like, you rely on them to be around and you don't expect that when they're gone that you're going to feel that loss, that secondary loss of, okay, where's my person?
That is so true. Thank you for sharing that and being so open and transparent. I want to circle back to understand. Are you saying that your sister's husband, they got married and he died the day of their wedding? Or what do you?
Yeah, it's actually, if you Google it, it's there. It's one of the first things because at the time that it happened, he died May 3rd of 2021. So when he passed away, and we Googled it just out of curiosity, nothing showed up as far as like groom or bride, passes away on wedding day. But a couple of days after he donated his organs, we're Googling it, and it's like all over People magazine, and it was a big deal. He was, as I
Hmm.
mentioned, a San Francisco firefighter, and People magazine wrote an article about him, donating his organs and the lives that he continued to save in his passing.
What was the date again? You said June?
It's May 3rd, 2021, and his name is Stephen Brantley. The even more difficult, challenging aspect of that is that the same sister's first husband committed suicide in a shopping mall parking lot 9 years before that. And so that was two potential love lives, soulmates gone. And so I had to take extra care of my sister for that reason too, is that it wasn't one, it
Absolutely.
was two.
Yes.
And she had children as well.
Wow. Teresa, thank you for sharing that. If someone, I would like for you to speak to someone who has put their grief on the back burner in caring for other people because you have a learned experience, you have professional knowledge, and I want you to speak to that person that's struggling, that's caring for other people, and they put their grief to the side.
10 out of 10 don't recommend. Um, grief
Yes.
grief is going to come with you whether you acknowledge it or not, avoid it or not, start to process it or not. It is a lifelong journey. It will show up in very unexpected ways. So for me, it showed up physically, getting the lump in the throat, the heart, being unable to breathe, being unable to sleep. And this is even weeks, months, and in some cases, years after the loss, emotionally charged. So, it could be a song that you hear on the radio, it could be a memory that somebody's, oh, remember that one time, and then tears. It could be, going to the restaurant where you used to go with my sister and just remembering funny things that happened there. I think that in my case, I actually developed even a stronger relationship with my loved ones as I started to go through the process of my healing journey. You and I had spoken, previously about the Grief Recovery Handbook. I really delved deep into that book because I had a lot of messaging that I received in my childhood, not acknowledging that it was a message, but after more reflection, discovered, oh, wow, I have a lot of messaging that I need to correct. And so I read the Four Agreements. I'm a big reader, I love reading. And so I used the handbook in order to identify what that messaging was. And then I used the Four Agreements to affirm the messaging that I would like for me to have going forward.
So the word messaging, can you explain what that is to people? They may have not been familiar with that term in the way in which it's being used.
Sure. So we have self-talk. We have the things that we say internally inside our head, or I would have, I should have, I could have, I want to do better, I want to do differently, I want to do more. Validating things that either I think about myself or what I've heard others say about me. I had to really look internally. Yeah, that idea that I did the best I could with what I had in the moment. It helped me to release the guilt and shame and resentment that I was carrying, and I haven't fully let it go. And I don't know that I ever will. And the reason, well, one of the reasons is at least with as it relates to the relationship with my father. I had discovered some information just recently about my father, and so I'm revisiting that experience relationship And I'm open to talking about that, but that's just what it is reprogramming and reframing ideas, thoughts, and beliefs that I had that I don't want carried with me going forward.
Thank you. I want to use an example from the Grief Recovery Handbook, and correct me if I get this wrong. There is a part of the book where they talk about a boy that lost his pet. And in the process of losing his pet, his parents immediately purchased another pet for him.
Another pet.
And then when relationships went bad, his parents would just say, there's other fish in the sea, so just get another partner. But that person identified that the messaging that was being taught to them over time was telling them, when you lose something, just replace it. But instead, that person learned that they wanted to sit with that loss. They wanted to honor that loss and respect that. And if there was some sense of doing something similar to it, that grief was not something that you had to run away from. And so that messaging that person had to tell themselves was they had been told over the years, when you lose something, replace it. When you lose something, replace it. So they never knew how to grieve because their concept was just replace it with something else. And I think when people look from the outside in at somebody that is lamenting, that is grieving, there is, I think, often a concept that you can replace what is lost and move on with your life. But when someone is in the state of great loss of a person, I think they quickly realize that is not the case. What would you say to that?
You definitely need to look at that further. A lot of people, as you mentioned, it's about the replacement. So I replaced my grief with work because it was a good distraction. And then I didn't have to, worry about me or, focus on me. But what I did find is that even in that, I was making a mess of things at work because I was so hyper focused on what was happening at work that I was making mistakes. I had the brain fog, I had the scatteredness, I had the irritability and emotional roller coaster, the anxiety of it all, and trying to be, all things to all people at all times and not putting my best self forward. You can't replace the relationships that you have because they were unique to that individual and that connection that you had with them. As I mentioned, I found a stronger relationship though in going back and remembering things as they truly are. Because, when you're first grieving, you remember the good. And I found that in my healing journey and going through my journal writing, the things that were coming up for me were not, oh, this person's up on a pedestal. It was like, oh man, if I could know then what I know now, this is what I would like definitely do differently, or this is what I would really want to tell you, even though I bit my tongue because, XYZ.
That is
Uh,
fair. Thank you for sharing that. So you came to a point that you decided to become certified in this work. What was that certification process like for you?
so I already had a bachelor's degree in human development, which is the study of life from birth to death. I didn't know what I wanted to do with that degree, but it was either social work, counseling, or teaching. I landed accidentally in a career for my degree from my master's degree in career development, which is a really career counseling. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with that either, but I know that it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I thought career counseling would be really good going back to the college that I graduated from and helping individuals figure out what they could do with their degree so they didn't waste as much time as I did. Now, with the certification for grief counseling, because I already had my master's degree, I was thinking, well, individuals go through some form of grief when they retire, when they get laid off, unexpected relocation, divorce, separation, individuals trying to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do on a single family income? So I thought, well, since I had so much experience with grief and loss, I have my master's degree. I can apply all things to help whomever needs me. I still haven't set like I direct want to work with those that are going through grief at work, or do I want to work with those that have generational trauma as I had? Or, yeah, I'm not exactly sure, but I know that I have a lot of knowledge from experience in different areas.
Okay. Well, you mentioned about being a certified grief counselor. What was that certification or from or where? What does that look like?
It's with the American Academy of Grief Counseling. And it's an online course whereby you read literature, you answer questions, you take a final, and after completing all the coursework, you get certified.
Okay. You said that was American.
American Academy of Grief Counseling. It was ideal for me because it was self-paced and from home,
Okay.
and having a full-time job and then participating in those courses at my own leisure, it really benefited me.
Thank you. There are often people looking for ways to use their grief to help other people. So being able to repeat that and share that is very helpful. What did you find in that process that you didn't know before? And just a few things. I know you're like a lot, but a few items that because I do know the more knowledge and information a person has about their grief journey, the more it normalizes the process. It takes off some of the stress. And obviously knowledge is power. But some people just go through everybody loses someone. I'm just going to get through this, but there's so much information to learn that can ease this journey. So, what are some highlights of some things that you feel like just really stuck out to you in this process of your certification?
I think it actually directed me more towards grief coaching than grief counseling. As I mentioned, I'm more of a doer than I am of a, let's just talk about our feelings. Okay, well,
Talk
I have my
therapy.
feelings, but what are we going to do about those
Okay.
feelings? When you ask people or you go to support groups, which I did, and you're asking them, well, how long have you been a member of this group? And, oh, it's been like 2, 3 years. Well, how are you, or where are you in your process? Oh, this is like, nothing has changed. Well, nothing changes if nothing changes. And so it was really important for me to find what worked for me, because and that's the other part of the equation, is that it's not a cookie cutter process. Everyone is unique. You and I might have the same experience having lost, maybe your parent, but it's not the same experience because our relationship with our parents were very different. And I found that when I was looking for my counseling therapists, it was a cookie cutter. This is a, here's this theory or this resource says. I didn't resonate with that. So, what I want to do is I want to get to know you as an individual. What areas are you feeling stuck in? Okay, let's work together because you're the captain of your ship. I'm just the tour guide. I'm going to help you get onto that path or that place that you want to get to.
You mentioned something about the concept of a first step. And oftentimes, going back to something you also mentioned, that it's not a cookie cutter. Sometimes people say, tell me the first step. What do I need to do first? I need you to tell me what it is. But I would dare say, as you mentioned, whatever everybody's first step may look differently, depending on what it is that you're grieving. And also the concept of, even though most of this conversation may be on the point of losing a loved one, grief does come to us in so many different ways. Can you talk about different, you touched on it briefly, but if you can expand a little bit more on different things or different ways or experience in which people experience grief?
Sure. So I've been with my employer for 17 years. And it's more than just 17 years. I graduated from that college. I met my husband there. I went to school there as a child with my mother when it first opened. I learned how to swim in their swimming pool when I was 3, 4 years old. So this place that I called my second home became my employment and my second home. And I really invested more time in this location than I did at times with my own family and my own home. when I experienced all of that loss, though, my priorities began to shift. And as a result, I took that mental health leave, and now I'm on this career path that I think is where I'm supposed to be. So I'm still grieving the loss of that 17 plus lifetime year relationship. I've lost homes. My husband was unemployed for a significant amount of time, and financially, we just couldn't afford it. And so, this was supposed to be our dream home that we were going to raise our children in. And so, we had to start from the bottom and work our way back up. I've lost pets, and a lot of folks think that that's not a significant loss. But if you're a fur baby owner, sometimes our fur babies, they carry us through the most difficult times.
Yes, absolutely.
So I've had a lot of different experience. Oh, the loss of that caregiving role when my father passed away. That was a significant part of my life, having cared for him the last 5 years of his life, and having that time back to reevaluate. Okay, well, what am I going to do at this time now? I don't have anywhere to go or focus my attention on.
Right. So thank you for mentioning those. I find that we as a society have learned how to get through those losses. Not so much with the proper coping skills, but we fumbled our way through it. But when someone we love passes, all the things that work for us with those other items don't particularly work well if we didn't really come with some really good coping skills on how to deal with grief. What would you say to that?
It's going to be really important to look at yourself and try to remove as best you can the distractions and the outside voices. You should do this, or have you thought about that? That it's really important to sit with yourself. And it's going to be very uncomfortable to do that because, well, sitting with myself, it took a long time for me to be able to do that.
That is fair.
And then you discover things about yourself. And then that too is an interesting thing that I'm not the person I was yesterday. I'm not the person I was a year ago. I'm not even the person I was 4 or 5 years ago. And what does that look like? And I think that my goal is to be better tomorrow than I was today, and to find gratitude and to really honor myself more, because I was a people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser. To feel obligated to do things, I'm like, I don't want to do that. And to be okay with that. Saying no was really, really hard for me. And I think I'm still learning that lesson. But to really just do things that bring you joy, bring you peace, bring you happiness, whatever that looks like. And if you don't know what that is, in this very moment, to just think about a happy memory, or what brings meaning and joy to you, or what hobby do you enjoy doing, and to focus your energies on those things if you don't know what it is, and then it'll come to you eventually.
Nice. And the idea of finding the things that come to us eventually and work. In your own journey of grief, what are some coping skills or things that you found work for you?
So in reading the book, that recovery handbook, I did start to journal. And I don't know if you can see it, but behind me I have my little timeline of events and activities. And so, I started from birth to the point that I lost my dad, and really identifying what those messages were, and just focusing on what aspects do I want to carry with me going forward. And that's how I started. That is, I had to really understand my upbringing, my father's upbringing, my father's father's upbringing. There's a lot of generational trauma that I grew up with that I didn't acknowledge or realize or understand that was a generational trauma. And so just working through that has really helped me to better understand my father and the person that he was. And I think I can even say that I love him more because I have a better understanding of the reason why he was the way that he was, if that makes sense.
It does, because when we're children and our parents are parenting, we have a child's perspective. Even though we may be adults, we are still leveraging the relationship that we had in our youth and how our parent shows up now. And there's something introspective to go behind and find out who they were now as an adult and understand the patterns, understanding how they develop this messaging or this methodology of doing things, and being able to say, I don't like it, but I see how we got here. Now the burden or the responsibility is on us to shift and change the patterns that we did not think served us well, and not keep putting that onto our children,
Yep.
or making a conscious decision to have a conversation that I've showed up like XYZ, but after some recent insight, I want to change how I'm showing up. And that means I'm going to show up like ABC. And I'm also willing for you to be accountability to me, because having adult children and to have a different conversation to say, what does that look like? And not only are we different from learned knowledge, we are different when people we love pass. It has a way of changing us a little bit more than what we knew, than what we could have comprehended until
Yeah.
it actually happens to us. If someone wanted to work with you, what is that process and how do they contact you?
Well, I would suggest that they go to my website, which is themorningfulltime.com. And I have 15-minute consults. Those are free. That's a way for you to get to know me to get to know you. If we agree that we're a good fit, then you can schedule a one-on-one appointment with me, and it's also on the website. I also have a TikTok account, and it's Teresea Archaga, where I post videos about my healing journey and the things that I find useful to me. I plan on starting a podcast. I haven't started it yet, but I have the beginning skeletons of what's going to be a podcast, and that'll be called Mourning Full Time. And I really like that name, Mourning Full Time. The Mourning Full Time, I want to talk about that if you don't mind.
Oh,
A
absolutely.
lot of
I'm hoping I
yes,
get to be a guest. I mean, silently hoping.
I would love that. So, Mourning Full Time, it's a play on words. Mourning is what we do on the outside. And I think that it is important for us to show our joy, to show our tears, to show our whatever it is that we're experiencing. I know that I struggled with that myself in the beginning and bottling up my emotions, and I suffered because of it. And I made those around me suffer because of it too. I like that it's in the morning so that, every day is a new day. And I love it because in the mornings I used to have coffee with my mom. I started drinking coffee when I was 6 years old in the morning, and I still do. I think that's a Latin thing. I'm not sure. But yeah, so, and then the full time, our grief is never done. It is a lifetime journey. We're changed forever for it. And so how do you want to change, or what do you want that change to look like? It is a choice. And so choose you.
Why do you say grief, we're never done with it? What makes you
Well, our
say that?
relationship with our loved ones doesn't end when they're gone. And we are forever changed because of our relationship with that individual and because of the loss that we have with them no longer being in our life. And so you're shaped by it, but it doesn't define us. It shapes us into who I am at this very moment with you.
Thank you. What is the difference between shaping and defining?
I don't define myself by my experiences. I don't say that, I am a survivor. I say that I am the person before you today because of my experiences that shape me.
And how does that messaging change someone's perspective and when they're living and experiencing this?
I think a lot of, at least in my experience, you are this. And when you hear something often enough, you start to believe it. So I am a griever. I am a survivor. I am strong. Well, I'm not always strong, but I always do put my best foot forward. And so I think that that's really important. And that's where the being impeccable with your word from the four agreements comes into play, is that you really have to pay attention to what you're telling yourself and what other people are saying about you, and then affirm, accept, or deny, what that messaging is.
Thank you. You mentioned that someone could reach out to you on your website. Do you take insurance or how is payment done for your services?
I do not take insurance, and you'll find that many counselors, therapists don't, and that's because a lot of insurance companies don't consider this a need supported under the plans. I can say that I did a lot of research when I was looking at rates, and I didn't want to be or pay as much as I did for my help. So I tried to make it, cost effective for those that really need it. And with coaching, therapy is long lasting and long time. But I think that with the coaching, you get the tools that you need so that you have the confidence in yourself and your ability to, take that next step forward. With
Thank you.
therapy, it kind of is like, I don't know when the end goal is. And so with coaching, you get to define what that end goal looks like for you.
Is there particular demographics that you work with or anyone in the world, location? Does it matter?
I am open to working with anyone that needs me.
Mm, okay, very good. I know I have asked you a lot of questions. Oh, and I want to say, yes, I did stalk her on TikTok and reach out and found her sharing her journey and more than willing to have this conversation. So thank you for entertaining my request because sometimes you're apprehensive when people message you, not particularly sure, but I appreciate you stepping out and trusting the process and having this conversation with me. Any questions you have of me?
I noticed that you have your TikTok lives. I saw that you have a little bit of a schedule, but I do find you randomly on there. Do you sometimes jump on there just because, or do you have like a defined set schedule?
So I am super schedule oriented. And two, so that doesn't always make me flexible and fun. So I'm trying to offset that. I do have a regular schedule that is every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I generally have a topic. It's now kind of moving into a Sunday, Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So pretty much Sunday evening at 7 and Monday at 7 p.m. You can find me doing a TikTok live and I'll put out the schedule. But I have learned to try to just be spontaneous and just go on live when it works. This podcast will air later, but I am wearing our Walk for Love 2024 t-shirt. And Walk for Love is an annual walkathon that Widowhood Real Talk with Tina hosts, and people walk 1 mile a day for 7 days. So, and walking 1 mile a day, at the end of the walk, people post hashtag Walk for Love, hashtag their loved one's name. Different people are posting that and they're celebrating their loved ones and they're tagging me so people can see literally around the world. So some people are walking and posting the multiple names of their loved ones at the end of their walk. Some people are challenged and cannot walk, but they're making a video and celebrating because to see other people putting their loved ones' names out there. So this week I've been doing Walk for Love lives every morning while I'm out walking. So that has been something that I've done. I will not carry that past Saturday. And in fact, all the people that have been doing it, they was like, can we get together and have a full live walk? So they just scheduled it for tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll put an event up. But sometimes if I have a prompting that a lot of people are struggling, I'll get on and do a live to support people and encourage people that are grieving. That's generally like about midnight to 3 a.m. And that is a time that I remember being up. The whole world was asleep and it was so loud. The silence was so loud. And
Yeah.
being able to get on TikTok and encourage people. And maybe it's playing a game, maybe it's giving words of affirmation. So there's a mix there, depending on what my schedule looks like in between doing things for the widowhood. I also have a full-time job, have a husband, have two adult children. So always trying to pour into my cup to have a space to do that. So I'm not pouring out of an empty cup. So yes, there's a schedule and then there is some versatility.
And I think that that is really so important what you just said about pouring into your cup. I think that when we're grieving and, life continues, life can get in the way of pouring into our cup. So just to be mindful that you are worth it and you are enough. And if you don't fill your cup, you won't have any energy or time to fill up anyone else's cup and do what you really want to do.
I would agree with that. Was there anything you wanted to talk about maybe that we didn't cover in the conversation or any topics that you wanted to make sure we went over?
I think we covered everything that I actually, it was interesting the way that I'm looking at my notes, the
Sure.
way that the conversation, one of the things that I did want to share though is about the stages of grief. And I get that question a lot is do we all go through the same stages of grief? That was also one of the things that led me to my career counseling is that,
Let me add a little bit to that. So it's interesting you would bring that up. And that is very much a question that people ask. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did a wonderful job in her work of death and dying. And in that process, she identified the stages that people who are dying, who have received a terminal illness, and those stages that she identified were identified for people who were leaving this world.
yeah,
So that idea of being in denial, hearing a terminal diagnosis, or trying to bargain, or being angry, or coming to acceptance, those things were meant for people who were prepared to leave or preparing to leave. It was not originally developed when her for people who are grieving the loss of a loved one. And I think that when people learn that, they realize they're not trying to put their grief in a particular box. What I think is more welcoming is looking at an emotional wheel and seeing some core emotions and saying, well, I feel like, and actually, let me see if I have one that, oh, yeah, I do, a wheel of emotion. So
yeah,
you may have anger, fear, surprise, happy, sad. And then you realize out of anger, you may feel hurt or threatened or hurtful or mad. And then you can see that your behaviors may come out as devastated or insecure or feeling embarrassed. Because, I mean, this is not, can't quite see it, but I mean, know you're familiar with it, but realizing that this array of emotions and your response, I think it opens up people to say, my grief could be in all these different places, but they're not going to fit into these nice 5 stages. I don't know. What
mhm.
would you say to that?
It was a framework, but it was never meant to be a map or a navigation. And, you might be driving in that car, but you're going to miss your detour because you think, oh my gosh, I didn't hit anger. Is there something wrong with me? Just know that we are very complex beings with a multitude of emotions and lived experiences, and that it's going to be really important for you to personalize your approach and focus your unique experience and the emotions that come with it. Avoid putting grief into that box. You're okay, you're normal. If you don't panic, if you don't if you don't get angry, if you don't have the acceptance, that's okay.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I have some people that they told me I've never cried and they feel uncomfortable about that. But I'm like, if that's how you process it, everybody may not be a crier. You may cry 3, 5, you may cry 10 years later, sitting at a park, giving a bird some crackers, and all of a sudden, all of these emotions may
Yeah.
flood. But I don't think people should beat themselves up
And
because
they
they're,
do.
yes. Can you talk about that a little bit where people feel like they're not expressing emotions like other people are and they're feeling uncomfortable about that?
Well, grief shows up in very unexpected ways at very unexpected times. You might lose your appetite. That is also an expression of grief, or you might binge eat, which is too an emotional experience. You might find yourself not being able to sleep or sleeping too much. That too is grief showing up. So, grief isn't just the outward expression of emotion. Our bodies tell us, what we're experiencing in ways that maybe we don't know or understand, or that we don't identify as such in the moment. But when you go through it, a lot of health conditions, come up. I became a diabetic and didn't know that that was associated with it. And I discovered I was a diabetic after my father passed away, or high blood pressure. So there's just a lot of different things that you're going to experience, and just know that it's all normal because it's your experience.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will allow you to close out the conversation to our listeners. And thank you for being here and sharing.
Thank you. For all of you that are watching this and going through your process of healing, I am with you. I support you. I am here. If you need a sounding board, if you need just somebody to listen to you, I am a safe space. And I hope that I get to work with you in the future.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.